Hi, this is Julie Murphy with Arizona Farm Bureau, and it's Friday, and we're in the 9:30, 10 o'clock hour, so it's time for us to have our Talk to a Farmer, Talk to a Rancher, Talk to a Winemaker, and you really are a farmer.
I call myself a wine grower.
A wine grower.
Right.
And I'm talking to Eric Glomski with Page Springs Cellars, and golly gee whiz, I'm so honored to be able to visit with you.
Psyched you're here, yeah.
When we came up, I think you were working on a backhoe or what?
Bobcat, yeah.
Bobcat.
Yeah.
So all the things that we have to do in the farming and the vineyard and the wine industry, it's definitely hands-on.
And if anything, that's part of the reason why I've stayed involved, because I don't mind doing office work, but if I did just office work, I would wither and die.
Yeah.
So, one of the neatest things about being a wine grower is that it's a very, very diverse job. I mean, one day I'll be working on actual vines in the vineyard, or maybe the next day it's irrigation. Next day it's a fertility issue, or maybe I'm fixing a tractor. Then I'm in the winery, lab, chemistry, microbiology, the artistry of blending, bottling lines, sales. I mean, it's just so diverse.
It's
really
amazing.
Neat.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I've discovered talking to all of you. You're my fourth interview, and we'll probably be doing about 2 months of this. And I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate you saying yes, because I feel like every time I come up, I'm stealing time away from what's most important. But tell us your Genesis story. What inspired you to get into the wine business?
Well, I think in part it all kind of started with Arizona. I was actually born in the burbs of Chicago. My parents were quite young when they had me, and when my dad finished grad school, we moved to Boston. So I kind of spent my 7 to end of high school in the Boston area. Took a year off, wasn't quite ready to go to college. Did 3 semesters of computer science at Northeastern University, and I decided I couldn't be indoors all the time. Back to my original statement, right?
Back to your original comment.
Yeah, I grew up hiking and backpacking and a lot of outdoorsy stuff, and I liked the creative side. I was a programmer. I liked the creative side of programming, but I was like, there's no way I can be indoors all the time. So I spent the next couple years traveling the country. I actually toured with the Grateful Dead for 2 years.
Oh,
and went to a zillion Dead shows. I was kind of had a mobile bar. It was an interesting time in my life. I did a lot of rock climbing at that time. It was a great way to see the country as a young man. But on the flip side of the coin, I started to get intellectually bored, and it was too long a story to tell, but I landed in Prescott, Arizona. The Dead were playing in Colorado, and I had some friends down here. We came and hiked the Grand Canyon, and I came to Prescott because a friend's best friend went to this little college called Prescott College. So decided to go back to school, studied ecology, and particularly riparian or river ecology, and I had minors in political economy and education. And I graduated from Prescott College, and my passion was rivers and restoring rivers. And I actually will connect this with grapes, don't worry.
Yeah, you're in the perfect place.
Yeah,
you are in the perfect place.
Oh, I mean, it was just, I really, probably because I was born in Illinois, raised in Massachusetts, deciduous trees and all the stuff that was along rivers. Arizona's so amazingly diverse. But along rivers, you have big trees, water, cattails, wetlands, all the organisms that go with that. That was a little slice of where I grew up. And I started a business restoring forests along rivers. And one year I got a job with the Prescott National Forest to inventory the condition of all the perennial stream reaches in the Prescott National Forest so that we could rate them and decide what needed help.
Fascinating.
2 years I got paid to hike rivers, and it was an amazing time in my life. I was young, and but this is where winemaking started, because back in the day there was the Homestead Act. People could go west and work on land, and if they improved it and were willing to go through some bureaucratic hoops, paperwork, they could privatize it, right? And a lot of the rivers I was working along were on national lands, but there were old homesteads there. So these were generally homesteads that either were never privatized, or for some reason maybe they were reintegrated with the national forest with trades and such. And invariably there were orchards along those. All the early settlers, they settled along water. These are Anglo settlers that settled along water, and they planted orchards, quince, pear, apples, and etc., pomegranate. And I around the same time met a mentor who's a mentor of mine to this day. He lives in Prescott. He's 94. We were just hanging out a few days ago. He's an artist. He's a fine artist. He has some of his works are in the Smithsonian, etc. And he lives in Prescott.
Wow.
But he lived off the grid in Arizona for 10 years. Lived by gardening, hunting, fishing. He had an orchard. And he made apple wines.
He had to have inspired you, obviously.
Oh,
wow!
In so many ways. And in the end, we started hanging out, and I said, "Oh, I'm out on these jobs. There's all these amazing heirloom apples." He's like, "Well, bring some back." So big expedition pack. Picture me like full of apples, and we made our first apple wine together. And I, to this day, and this is when I became a winemaker. I wasn't a winemaker before that. I went through the process, but I made this wine with him, and he said, "Okay, we're going to let this rest for X number of months." And we were at this party, and we're going to break out the wine we made, right? And I harvested the apples, and they kind of reminded me, they looked like a Red Delicious, but they were crunchy and styrofoamy like a Macintosh, which are the apples I grew up on in New England. And when we opened up the wine and I smelled it, I remember closing my eyes and smelling it, and it reminded me exactly of the place where I harvested those apples. It was the first time I realized that wines are these artistic expressions of landscapes. Because we always think of like art, we think of art in our culture, we think of art visually, okay, colors, and then you look at Monet's Water Lilies, and it gives you a sense of what that place was like, right?
Exactly.
You listen to a piece of music, maybe we think about the music as art. And it evokes these emotions, but I think
and sends you back to that place.
Exactly,
and what you're saying.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah. And I think that we have neglected in our culture the sense of taste and smell and the role it plays in art and connecting us with memories, emotions, feelings, and places. And think about it. If you think about it, so that's a artistic expression of it. But even from a science perspective, okay, one apple grows here, one apple grows here. This one pulls. The soils are different. So different minerals, nutrients are pulled out of that soil. Maybe it's higher in elevation, lower in elevation. Maybe the aspects, north, south, east, west, different water supply. Right. So really all of the things that make up the ecology of the landscape, which the French call terroir, are being captured
absorbed
in these fruits, right?
Captured in
And then I all of a sudden, it totally haphazardly was like, oh, this light went off. And I was like, I get this. This apple represents this place. And then I was possessed after that. And so I just started buying every wine I could. I started reading things on wine. I just started grad school, and I was also teaching at Prescott College, and I started going out to California for harvests. I stopped teaching in the fall. It's a long story, but in a nutshell, I realized that grapes are amazingly complex chemically, much more complex than an apple. And they were even this more succinct conduit for place. And like the French, my brother lived in Paris. He did a postdoc at Louis Pasteur in Paris. He's a really interesting guy. Was distilling in Charlottesville, Virginia. And
so as interesting as you then.
He's way more interesting than me. He's a world traveler. He speaks other languages. But I'd go visit him, and I would visit Burgundy. You've heard of Burgundy, the famous Burgundy where Pinot Noir is from. Mm-hmm. And some of the old men there would hold up a glass of Pinot, and they'd say, Pinot is the ghost. And I'm like, oh yeah, Pinot's light in color, right? And they go, no. When you hold it up, you can see the landscape through the wine.
Oh,
right?
Wow.
And I was just like, whoa, that's like my hair stood on end. And I was like, these guys, that's exactly what I was just trying to express to the apples. Like all these things started to connect. So now, for instance, I grow Syrah in 4 different vineyards, same grape. All those wines are completely different. And so we even have t-shirts up there. I probably should have worn it, but we have t-shirts that say Liquid Landscape, because we're really trying to share the idea that wine is an artistic expression of place, and we make wines that express Arizona.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of words.
Oh, no, it was beautiful. And so literally an apple wine, well, that's part of the story, that the apple wine inspired this, and you could send yourself back to exactly where you were when you
I
pulled
smelled
that
the
apple
trees.
off of the tree?
Like, have you ever smelled the ponderosa?
Yeah, I
You know how
love
they have
that
that
smell.
beautiful butterscotch? I swear it was that and the dried grasses, and there was this little babbling brook going by. And, and this was the fall, of course. And so the plants were drying, and there's just all these fall smells in the air. And I closed my eyes, and that's where I was. And
Wow.
that was the moment. It was Epiphanous. That's the moment I became a winemaker.
So, fast forward. I could talk to you all day, but fast forward, and you found this place. Was it part of a previous homestead?
Absolutely.
Okay.
What's super interesting is, number one, because Oak Creek's right here.
Right.
I had hiked along this, and I remember hiking along here from the bridge over here by the fish hatchery down past this, and there was a field here where my vineyard is now, and there was a horse and a cow, and I remember looking up, and there was these little white old houses that were really atypical for the area because they looked colonial in style, and they kind of reminded me of New England.
And you have still
and
some of them on
we
the
actually
place.
ran with that. The whole building we based on that style because that was here. And I remember looking up at that place and this place and going, oh my God, this is the most beautiful place I've ever seen on the planet. Went back, ended up making wine in California for several years. I'm at a wine conference in Sacramento, and there's an Arizona wine table. And I'm like, okay, I'm making wine in California now. I went out there to kind of cut my teeth, but I always wanted to come back here. And so I visited the Arizona table. Kent Callaghan, all the early guys were there, and I want to pick their brains and learn stuff from them. And there's this big guy standing in the back, just kind of by himself. He was like 6'6", probably 280.
Kind of intimidating.
Yeah, but he's real quiet and understanding. He's holding this bottle without a label on it. And I was like, who is this guy? I'm going to go talk to him. Well, his name was John Marcus. John Marcus was one of Dr. Kevorkian's attorneys.
Oh, wow.
He was from Michigan. He was a linebacker in Michigan State, thus his size. He had planted the first vineyard in northern Arizona post-Prohibition. He was right upstream from here.
Wow.
And he's like, I grew up on a farm. I don't really know how to make wine, but I've got all these grapes. And he's like, I'm looking for a winemaker. And I was like, wow, I'm thinking of leaving California sometime. And he goes, well, you should come visit. So I came and visit, and he lived about 4 miles upstream from where we are now.
I'm sorry, but I think some of this is providential.
Right. I mean, and so I end up, and another parallel story, I was a single father. I had 2 sons. I lost my first wife.
Oh, God bless you.
And I'm kind of struggling raising these 2 boys myself, working full time. And I remember telling my parents I was thinking of coming back and being a winemaker for this guy in the middle of central Arizona. I lived in the Bay Area, this rich cultural area. And they're like, you're going to move back there as a single dad? You're never going to find a woman. They're just beating me up. And I said, look, this is where I'm going. The first week I'm here, I take the job with John. I get my youngest son into Montessori school, and I meet a single mom with 2 kids. I had 2 sons. She had 2 daughters, and she was one of the teachers there. And we have been together for 23 years now.
Is she also the yoga instructor?
Yes. Yeah, Gail,
she's
my wife.
precious.
And so everything just was amazing. We lived down there. We ended up connecting in this amazing way. We all moved in together and lived in a house down on the river at John Marcus's farm. And we helped him make his first couple of vintages, but I said, hey, I'm going to go off on my own pretty soon. Lo and behold, right down the road from him is this place I hiked along and was like, there's that place. And there's a for sale sign.
Oh, gosh.
And I couldn't afford it.
You had to be pinching yourself.
Yeah, it was.
Is this for real?
Right,
Is this for real?
I brought Gail here and I was like, here's what I'm thinking of doing. I just want you to know what you're in for.
So what was her reaction?
She wrote a story. We've been doing a newsletter every quarter for 21 years. Okay.
Oh, wow.
And we hold on to them and we have them online digitally. I brought her here and I said, look, I want to go to the hilltop across the stream and look down on the land so we can talk about this. And she just hiked up her skirt, crossed the river with me. We're on the top. And if that didn't like personify her whole attitude, she just rolled up her sleeves and we got to work. And, we built this business together. We raised 4 kids. The youngest is now 26. And it's been not without its challenges and tears and tough
and heartache
moments.
And
but
muscle soreness,
back. But it's been so amazing. I like creating things. I just and the people here too. We have these families that have been with us forever. Corey, who you just met a second ago, our winemaker.
Your winemaker.
Yeah, because I used to be the winemaker, right? And Corey used to be a sommelier at a restaurant in town.
Oh, wow.
And I brought in my wines. He's like, oh, Arizona wines.
Oh, so
Totally dissed me.
He didn't think he liked them.
No, and so I came back with some wines blind one time, and I said, I'm gonna mix these up with some other wines from California, wherever you. And he ended up being like, oh, okay, maybe, Next thing you know, he's just showing up here randomly.
Wow.
Volunteering, helping. And
so he's been with you for quite some time then.
Like 15. Well, it's been interesting. He's got a really interesting story too, so Corey grew up in Sedona, okay? Had kids very young, and so kind of finished high school, went right into being a parent, worked at the Cowboy Club, Silver Saddle, kind of a well-known restaurant up in town.
Yep.
And he's really, really smart. Never went to college or anything, but he just started coming here, and he's like, I'll work for wine. Just let me taste through the barrels sometimes. Wow. Next thing you know, he's the assistant wine. He's working in our tasting room, and then the manager of our tasting room. And then he kind of rises to the top of that, and he goes, I want to learn how to make wine. And I said, I don't have a position here, but I was also winemaker at Arizona Stronghold. And I said, if you want to come over to Stronghold, he took a 50% pay cut, became a cellar worker over there, worked his way up to assistant winemaker there / winemaker. And then he came back over here, and he's been our winemaker for several years.
That's awesome.
And he and I, I'm the quote unquote executive winemaker. I oversee the artistic side of it. But Corey does all the hard work. He makes all the real decisions. And I've kind of put myself out to pasture a little bit, because I feel like taking our wines to the next level is really about our grapes and our farming. And so I oversee that now. Yeah.
Barbara Predmore, when she had Alcantara, before she sold it, she used to say that it really is all about the grapes. And for those that have joined us, just know this: Talk to a Farmer Friday, Talk to a Rancher Friday, Talk to a Wine Cellar Master Friday. And you might have noticed that we're in the barrel room, I guess. Is that fair? Mm-hmm. And we left the door open because we kind of wanted everybody to have a sense of how, winemaking is complex. It's science, but it's art, as you speak of. And
industrial.
It's a little bit industrial. Yeah, so we just felt like that would be important to share. And so, again, fast forward, you built this, and I can tell that your ecology major is really shining through, because every time I come, it has. Yeah. Every time I come here, I feel like, I'm being surrounded by nature. We can walk to Oak Creek.
We have interpretive signs on the
property.
Interpretive
signs on the property, all the plant life, and then you've got the vineyards. But fast forward and tell us some of the wine grapes that you're growing and the wines that you're making. Yeah. And I wanted to have these 3 bottles here. To your point about Corey, he wanted to make it all work for us, so he brought us in a barrel so we could stick the wine on here.
Yeah.
But this has just been recently bottled. But
yesterday,
yesterday. But first, tell me some of the wines that you're making.
Okay. Well, if I start in the vineyard with the grapes, we have 3. Well, up till just recently, we had 4 estate vineyards. Okay. And we call them estate vineyards. You don't actually have to own them, but you have to control them. You have to make all of the decisions that lead into the quality of the grapes and thus the wines. So up here, and if you go to our website, you'll see all this. We have the home vineyard, which is the one right below the winery here.
Right. And everybody should come, by the way. Yeah, and it's just Page Springs Cellars.
Yeah, Page Springs Vineyards and Cellars.
Okay.
PageSpringsCellars.com is our website.
Okay.
And we're on social media, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
We're on the south side of Sedona. And then across the river is Dos Padres Vineyard. So that's named after my 2 fathers, my father and my stepfather, who own the land, but we lease it from them.
Oh, awesome.
And then just upstream between us and where John Marcus's place used to be, is called House Mountain Vineyard. That's named after, there's a volcano right there called House Mountain. And that's a joint venture between us and the Petsnick family, who have the DA Ranch.
Okay.
And then way down in southeastern Arizona in the Chiricahuas near Portal, most people haven't heard of Portal, there's a little canyon called Whitetail Canyon, and we have a vineyard down there that we call Colibri, which is Spanish for hummingbird. The highest hummingbird diversity in North America is in the Chiricahuas. And
appropriately named then.
Right? And so we have a 10-acre vineyard down there. 10 acres, home vineyards 4, Dos Padres 8.5. house is 8.5. And at these vineyards, white grapes, mostly Rhone varieties, but some Italian. We've got Marsanne, Roussanne, which are both Rhones. Claret Blanche, which is a Rhone. We have, let's see if I can remember all these. Malvasia, which is actually originally Turkish. Most people think of it as Italian or Greek.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Malvasia. We have Vidal Blanc. We have Picpoul Blanc. And I'm scanning my brain here. I think, so that's all of our whites. No, sorry, Grenache Blanc, Vermentino. So that's all of our whites. So we have 8 whites.
8 whites.
And then we have several clones of Syrah throughout our vineyard. So Syrah, Grenache, Mourvèdre, Mourvèdre. We have Cinsault, which is off the beaten path southern French grape. Counoise, another one like that. Petit Verdot. Let's see here. Going through the brain. Barbera. Carignan. Graciano, Spanish. Did I forget anything? Mission, which is a kind of a neat story.
Oh, yeah.
And last but not least, Aglianico.
So that's 11
reds. A lot of grapes. Yeah.
A lot of grapes.
Yeah.
And I wanted you, because you were explaining to it before we went live, and including, like, taking the air out of the bottle, which I know is not a geeky and unsophisticated way for me to say it, but tell the story and why these 3.
Yeah, so this is our white bottling season.
Okay.
That's what I said when we came in, and we generally bottle rosés first in the year, then go into whites, then light reds, dark reds, and some we hold over through the next vintage. These aren't all the wines we just bottle, but these are a good representation of what we do. So this bottle in the middle, this label right here is our original label. All of our labels were done pen and ink by my sister-in-law.
And her art is beautiful. I've always loved how you guys do your labels.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And this is kind of a representation of our place, some of the buildings here. And if it's a vineyard designate, so the apogee of winemaking here for us is if we think something's good enough, we want to bottle it as a single varietal, and we want to say what vineyard it came from. Okay?
Oh, cool.
So that's back to this idea of place, right?
Yeah.
Here's this hyper-focused, precise little aspect of this place right here.
So that means this would be one grape.
Exactly.
It's not a blend.
And if I read it, so 2024, because vintage is super important. Most people don't realize that our laws and wine laws around the world link place and vintage. Okay, you can't say vintage without a place, and you can't say a place without a vintage. Because obviously, if you say a place, the different climate in each year and everything, the weather that happens is different, right? Mm-hmm. So if I send this into the feds for approval and I say 2024 red wine, and don't say Arizona or Page Springs or something like that, they won't approve
They'll reject it.
Or if I say Page Springs, Arizona, Malvasia, and there's no vintage, they'll reject it. Okay? Because that's it's not just place, but it's time and place. But anyway, so 2024 Malvasia Bianca, the grape, Dos Padres Vineyard, Verde Valley, Arizona. Okay, Verde Valley is REVA here, newly established American viticulture area.
One of the newest of the 3.
Yeah, and we always put exactly what's in there, because you can have 75% Malvasia and have 25% something else and still call it Malvasia. We don't really believe in that. We always put exactly what's in the bottle. So this says 100%, right? And there's usually a little story about the place, but this is from the vineyard across the way, Dos Padres, from a very distinct block on a very distinct soil, and we loved it, so we bottled it just like that.
That's awesome.
And so that's what that is. Then we have 2 other bottlings that we did yesterday. This one is a different...
A 14-hour day, I hear.
Yeah, well, actually, and not for me, more for Corey. But yeah, it was a long day, the corker vacuum. We vacuum out, this little headspace here, we vacuum out all that air right before the cork goes in, so that there's nothing in there to spoil the wine, and the vacuum was having problems. And it can be frustrating, because the bottling line is this mix of mechanical and pneumatic, air-based, and electrical. And all these things are synchronized, and if they get out of sync at all, like let's say that cork's about to go in and it doesn't suck the vacuum right beforehand, or it's a split second different and the cork goes in, it'll actually generate pressure because it's compressing that space, and you'll notice it. We have a tester. We actually poke a needle through the cork with a gauge on it, and we want to see it get sucked, the gauge get sucked below zero.
So you know that it's all air has been vacuumed out.
Yeah, and we measure vacuum with something called inches mercury. That's the so if you were going to put a straw on something and suck it down, and it was full of mercury, moving mercury 1 inch, there's a certain calibration. That's So anyway,
that's how it calibrates it.
Exactly. And then so this one here is called Vino de la Familia Blanca, so white wine for the family. This is one of the more aromatic wines that we make, and you can see there's a different label. It's actually a scene along a river, and interestingly, it's a man and a woman, 2 boys, 2 girls, which is our family. And Familia Blanca is a blend of Malvasia and Traminette and Gewürztraminer. Most people haven't heard of Traminette. Oh, and I didn't say that because that was another grape we grew down there.
So now it's 12.
Yeah, right. So Traminette is a hybrid, and it's actually Gewürztraminer crossed with another grape. And there are North American grapes that are more cold hardy than European grapes. And down here at the home vineyard, which is where the Traminette's grown, it's along the river, and all the cold air from Flagstaff and above Sedona drains down here at night. And it's, even though it's our lowest elevation site, it usually has the lowest lows, and we're more apt to get frosted here in the spring. So we've planted grapes that are a little more hardy.
Okay.
And so this is a super aromatic, perfumey, very intense wine. This Malvasia is fairly perfumey too, but not as much as this. And then this one's pretty cool. You can see yet another concept. This was adapted for this from some of our other labels, but this is what we call the mountain stream concept. And we have a group of wines normally that are kind of our higher end blends. Okay, but this one we made for a national wine club.
Oh, wow.
And this is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, wine club in the country. And we named this way. We worked with them on this. It's called Alma del Suelo, which is Soul of the Soil. And it's 2024, and it just says Blanca, white. But if you go on the side here, it'll talk about the grapes that are in it. And this is a blend of Roussanne, which is a classic Southern French grape that we grow in 2 different vineyards. And another, see if I'm going to remember this now. This is Roussanne Grenache Blanc from Dos Padres mainly. And this got bottled yesterday. It's being shipped out. We did 265 cases, and this is being shipped out Monday, and it will go into wine club shipments around the country and hopefully promote Arizona wine.
That is awesome. And it's only bottling. If you do something similar, it's...
Yeah, this is a one-off. I mean, maybe they'll call us up and say, we want more, but we're also talking to them about, so I started doing apple wines again, too.
Oh, cool.
And so John
Full
McCain,
circle.
Yeah, right. John McCain, when he was lived right upstream from us here.
Oh, yeah.
And Cindy still owns the property, and then their neighbors, Ollie and Sharon Harper, they kind of have this compound down there. Okay, and that whole area, they have this beautiful little organic apple orchard with a bunch of heirloom apples. Awesome. And we harvest all those apples, and I make, I can't legally call it this, but we make apple ice wines. And we take all the apples, we shred them, we press them to juice, and then we freeze them into 300-gallon ice cubes. Okay?
Really?
And then you know how, right? You know how when you take like fruit juice concentrate out of the freezer, and it thaws a little bit and the syrup comes off first? That's what we do with these big ice cubes, because there's the sugar syrup has a different melting point than the pure ice. And so if you let it thaw a bit, the syrup comes off the outside and seeps out, and the water stays frozen a little bit longer, and we can leave the water behind and concentrate the apple juice.
Okay.
And then we ferment that. So make
the syrup thaws before the ice.
Exactly.
Literally just the water. Okay.
Yep. And we then ferment it and make apple ice wine. So it concentrates the apple, and we make them varietal. So we've made like Golden Delicious, Rome Beauty, Stamen Wine Sap, Pink Lady.
Now, when are those available? I'm going to try those.
We do them in little half bottles, and we have the very last. They sell out really quick.
I bet.
We have Golden Delicious still from last year up in the tasting room. So maybe that's something you can try, and we'll send you off with. And then we had already sold out of the Rome Beauty and the Wine Sap. Oh, no, sorry, we made Gravenstein last year. And this year we have them frozen, and we're just about to thaw them and make this next batch.
So cool.
And that is what this wine club is interested in maybe doing for their next round of wines. I sent them some of these apple wines because they were like, we want to do something unique and da-da-da. And Arizona's already unique, but do you have anything really crazy? And I said, you should try these Arizona apple ice wines. And I sent them. They were like, oh my God, how much of this can you make? And I was like, well, not a lot. But so anyway.
So, and I kind of just lost my train of thought. With how did this, that's what it was. How did this group discover you?
This,
if they're from all over the country.
Classic example of, even though the wine industry is international,
right?
It's pretty small, and it's very, I would say I can't tell you how often people have said to me, God, I can't believe how much information you guys share amongst yourselves. Your competitors, why don't you be real secretive? Most of us are because we all feel like, I'm going to tell you some things, you're going to tell me some things, we're all going to do a better job. Right. And it's very collegiate, it's very collaborative. Sam Pillsbury, a dear friend of mine who has Pillsbury Wine Company.
He's one of our Farm Bureau members. He's a sweetheart.
Yeah, and he's selling his vineyard right now.
Kind of sad about that.
I know, me too. But I'm also happy for Sam. He's been doing it a long time.
Yeah.
Another inspiration for me, for our industry. But anyway, Sam had a young woman working there one year. Her name was Nicole. And she got passionate after working with him, and she went to Australia, got a winemaking degree, I believe in Adelaide. And then she did an internship, I believe, at a winery in Bordeaux, France. And she met her husband out there.
Oh, okay.
So she started making wines in France with him, and he makes wines for this wine club. So she called me up one day and said, hey, Eric, remember me? I was like, of course. And she said, would you be interested in doing this? I said, yeah, maybe, let's talk. And we all had a phone conference. She was in France. These other people were in California. I was here. And lo and behold, here we are several months later. It was all because of her. Cool. She picked us.
And I have another question that's kind of off script. So Bordeaux, again, this goes back to place. If it's a Bordeaux, if they call it Bordeaux wine, it has to come from Bordeaux.
Yeah, absolutely.
If it's a true champagne, it has to be from Champagne.
Yep.
Are we ever can we create that here? Do you think that will happen to us over the decades, maybe?
I think so. What I see going on is because I've read a lot of history. I've been really interested in wine history too, like way back to, how did grapes spread around from the Fertile Crescent outward, from et cetera, et cetera. And, the way it seems in our country, at least, that these industries develop is you get lots of small guys, mom and pops. And, just 20 years ago, we had like 8 wineries in a state.
Yeah.
And
now we have
over 100, like 125 or something. I'm not exactly sure. And there's some complexities of what's bricks and mortar versus brands that are made at other wineries. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I think what tends to happen is that over time, people start growing grapes. And they have successes and failures, just like me. You plant this does great, this doesn't. You pull that up, put another one, and over time, you start getting it right. We decide that, okay, this grows well here. Like if you think about Napa, is all about Cabernet.
Right.
The Russian River, the Willamette Valley of Oregon is all about Pinot Noir. And Tuscany is all about Sangiovese.
That's right.
Germany is about Riesling. Obviously there's other grapes, but when you think of Burgundy, it's about Pinot Noir. When you think about these iconic places, it's because they've had long periods of time to really figure out what grape grows best there, right?
So it takes time.
It takes time.
Anything.
And failure and trial and error. And I think that Arizona is so diverse that I think we're going to have a lot of champion grapes.
Very cool.
And that'll be in different soils, at different elevations. And so maybe, one of the things that'll define us is how diverse we are. Right. And so will these regions, because the other thing is in Europe, they generally don't put grape names on bottles. Okay. So when you think about it, if you look at most labels, like let's take France, they're either, they're going to be regional. They're going to say Bordeaux or Burgundy or the Loire or the Rhone. But then they're going to have chateau or family names, okay?
Duh.
And then
which makes sense.
Yeah, and then you have to be educated and know that in this area they grow that or these grapes and their blends. It's much, like I think about all the things I had to do to learn how to interpret European wine labels, because it's not like Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon. That's from 2020. That's pretty straightforward.
Right.
Then you have Bordeaux from the sub area of Saint-Emilion, from this vineyard, from this family, and then a bunch of notes about, like they'll say mise en bouteille au chateau, which means it was bottled at the chateau. And it's like this encyclopedia of confusing information.
Yeah.
That is very informative, but you really have to know a lot.
Yeah.
And will we develop, like, I haven't really seen, like, we have Napa, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like Burgundy or Rhone.
Right.
It's a whole different nomenclature and culture,
Right.
Yeah.
And we're a young nation.
Right.
And when you think about it, how long it took them to develop what they developed, to your point, really testing what grapes were.
Generational,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask you about your nose.
Okay.
Not your physical nose, but actually your physical nose is
mid-size, doesn't stick out too much.
good Roman nose. People can tease me about my nose, but we're talking about how important it is. I got a vibe in just studying some of the things on you that I don't know if I want to call it a sensitive smell, but you've got some distinctions and you can kind of recognize.
Well, it's a tool.
It's a tool.
For sure. Yeah.
So, I mean, talk about that.
Well, they say, well, okay, so when people think of taste,
right.
you think of your mouth and your
Right.
tongue, right? But the reality is most of what we taste is actually our retronasal. So what happens is your tongue is really simple. It's sweet, salty, sour, now umami has been added on, et cetera, right? So it's very simple. But what about all these nuances that we get from wine? The apples, the cherries, the raspberries, the hints of almond and lilies and violets. That's the wine going down the back of our throat and volatilizing. Okay. And then these vapors go up and hit all these receptors in our sinuses. And those are incredibly sensitive, right? And there's zillions of receptors that go up and connect to our brain.
Yeah.
And that's why when you have a cold, you can't taste things, because it's really all about your nose. The feel of a wine, which is important too, is all about your mouth, right? So anyway, different people have different abilities. And I've never thought I was like at the apogee of abilities. I think I'm decent. But the other thing is I've tried really hard to train myself. And most importantly, the biggest thing to me is that I think we generally don't develop a vocabulary around our sense of taste and smell.
So that you can truly have labeled identities of the different things you're tasting.
Yeah, and
you may have a great nose. But
can you describe it? And have you built the association between what you're experiencing and your language?
Okay.
And so, for instance, I've tasted a lot of wines, and the interesting thing is winemaking, because it was clear to me that I need to identify flaws and problems that we're developing, but also develop an appreciation and the ability for what was good and how to guide that, and then maybe blend things to create these tapestries that are a little more complex but still very harmonious, right? And
so you were almost forced to train yourself to improve.
And think about it like being an athlete. You have to develop you're a pole vaulter, or you have to develop these skills and techniques to do what you do. Meanwhile, you have to build your body and your muscles. Well, I had to taste and smell millions of wines. But then you realize, wow, this is really informing, because the next thing you know, you're in the grocery store and you're just 5 different apples. I'm going to smell all those. And it expands because you want to educate yourself and you want to build associations between all of these things. And it's not that there are apples in this wine or red cherries, but some of the same chemicals that are in cherries or apples are in this wine. And if you learn them with a straight cherry and go, okay, that's what it is, there's a little bit of that in here, and I can go, oh, Rainier cherry. Or does that make sense?
So you're almost saying then, and maybe if I try to get better at this, I should smell a variety of apples, fruit especially, and then sometimes they say, oh, that smells earthy, or I can smell the morning frost,
right,
or something.
Asphalt after a rain, or like all these which we smell sometimes.
We do
in wines.
smell, yeah. Okay.
My brother and I, so when my brother was doing his PhD at Berkeley, I was making wine in the Santa Cruz Mountains in the South Bay. And right near him was this place called the Berkeley Bowl. It's like one of the most amazing produce markets in California. I mean, and we would go in there together, and there'd be like 20 different kinds of peaches.
Wow.
And there'd be, all these like white asparagus, purple asparagus. And we would just go in there and they had a liquor license. So you could get a glass of wine or a beer, and you could wander around, and we would just smell things all day long. We'd buy a few things, and
the Glomski brothers are smelling the fruit stand. Be aware, be aware.
and so it's really just like anything else. You do it enough, and different people. So it's interesting. Our winemaking team here, we have the canary concept here, because we realize you're always better as a team. We realize that there's some things that I'm hypersensitive to that Corey isn't. There are some things that Corey's sensitive to that I'm not, and then Bree, our assistant winemaker, is sensitive. So as a team, like we go, okay, I'll be like, oh, I smell this, and they're like, oh God, I barely get that, but yeah, now that you say it, and then maybe it's a problem, and it means we need to go address something, or so your nose really is a tool. We have all kinds of lab work we do and chemistry, and we can describe things, but really your nose is absolutely your best tool as a winemaker. You're fermenting things. If they start to have problems, you smell it first. If it's going really well, you go, okay, I don't have to worry about this. And you move to the next fermenter and you smell that and you go, okay, what's going on here? And it's you have to stay vigilant and understanding and learning and paying attention.
I know one of the first things that you should do is look at the glass of wine. But really your nose is right up there.
Right.
It's up front and forward.
I always get it going. By mixing it, you're actually, back to your veteran, you're volatilizing components. Sometimes I warm it up with my hands because heat volatilizes things too.
Yeah.
And then I usually, and sometimes when I'm doing work here, I put my hand over the glass, I shake it, I lick my hand off, and then I stick my nose in because I can really smell. Like, I won't do that at a fine restaurant, but here I will, because that really gets all of those things that I want to smell into that headspace inside the glass. Yeah.
Joel, any questions so far? And we probably have to wrap it up because I've probably exceeded my 30 minutes. But this has been fascinating. That's an excuse to come back. So no questions. We're all good. It's all looking good. Good. And I've been here with Eric Glomski from Page Spring Cellars, and we've been talking obviously about wine. I feel like in this 30 minutes I've already learned so much, Eric. And we're going to continue the series. It's probably going to go into the first part of July because we have a lot of winemakers, 120, 125. And it's an amazing industry here in the state of Arizona. We can be very proud of our wines because they're award-winning wines. We have 3 AVAs. Remind me what AVA stands for.
American Viticultural Area. And
that's Sonoyta, Wilcox, and the newest,
Verde Valley.
Verde Valley. And I think 2021, 2022 or something like that. Yeah,
about 2 years ago.
2 years ago. Yeah. So it was time, and and it's a pretty special place. One last thing. What's your take on the future?
Well, it's interesting. The world is changing right now.
I know.
And it's a very interesting time politically and economically for our country and our world. I see a bright future for Arizona. I think we're going to be in a little bit of a rough time for the next few years. But for me, I love beverages. I love alcoholic beverages. My brother's a distiller, and we always joke we needed one more sibling so they can be a brewer, so we can complete the Holy Trinity, right? But wine to me, when we worry as a culture, there's a little bit of a neo-prohibitionist movement going on right now. When we worry as a culture about alcohol, I think there's a legitimate worry about that. Alcohol in excess is not a great thing. No. But a lot of things in excess are not great things. Exactly. Right? I mean, and I'm
not going to stop drinking wine.
Well, and I'm not either. And but to me, when you think about alcohol abuse, rarely is it associated with wine. Wine is, to me, special because it has these cultural and historic underpinnings that have to do with history and people and place and sharing meals together. I mean, I don't just go and, who shoots wine?
Nobody shoots wine.
Right? Who guzzles wine? To me, wine is part of a cultural ritual that's very important. And I'd like to believe that that's going to persevere. It's been around
Yeah.
a long time. And I think Arizona, back to my statement about ecological diversity, I think over time we're going to find those spots where each grape grows. And, I think some of it's already happened or happening. And we have the potential, especially with elevation. If the world continues to get warmer, we grow in the mountains here.
Yeah.
I think there's a future for us here, and it will be microclimates throughout the state. And we have a huge tourist economy, so we have lots of people visiting us. And the last economic study that was done, I don't remember the exact number, but I think
it was $4.25 billion.
Yeah,
is what
it's like 260 million in contribution.
Yeah.
If you might think about interviewing Tom Pitts sometimes.
So you are
he's the man on that. Yeah.
You are the second that's recommended, so I promise that I will.
Cool. He's the one who basically got that study done.
Okay.
And he's been a champion of Arizona wine for the longest time. He's a great guy. He lives here in the very Valley of Jerome.
Okay.
So anyway, I'm excited for Arizona's future.
Matt Halderson with the Yavapai County Extension was the one that gave me his contact information. I just need to reach out to him because I want to give this time, just like a good wine, you've got to give it time. I want to give this whole series time because there's so much to say, and even this interview, there's so many other things I want to ask you.
We barely grazed the surface.
Yeah, we barely did. But Eric Glomski, it's an honor to know you, and I am so glad that you studied ecology because it's a reflection of how I've always loved your wines.
Thanks.
And I'm not, I have my partial. There's some that I really enjoy more than others. I really like your wines.
Thank you.
And I'm proud of my Arizona winemakers. And I tell my people, my network, they need to try Arizona wines because
you're here.
We're in a class by ourselves. So thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Pleasure.